Several years back, I decided that I would take action on a long-term goal of mine and buy an RV and drive around the country and live in it and make a living out of it and just try it. I had no idea what I was doing, none. But secretly, I purchased an RV, secretly meaning secretly from my live-in boyfriend, from my friends, from my family. Purchased an RV and took off on the road, not having a clue what I was doing. Nothing about the vehicle, nothing about the life. Now, probably not a good way to go right into retirement, but I think in some ways, all of us do that in certain areas of retirement. On that trip, I was not as prepared for the trip as I thought I would be, which might be the case for some of you watching and starting your retirement. One of the things being our attitude towards retirement. Some of the biggest challenges we have are dealing with our attitude and the change in our life structure. And so let's get into some of those. The first one being a change from our structured schedule to a non-structured schedule, particularly when we're talking about work. I had a good run of corporate success at 49 when my mother called me and told me that her cancer had progressed to a point where she needed help. My agreement with her was that I would come and live with her and be her home health care person until she passed. I didn't know how long that would be, but I made that commitment. And so at almost 50, I picked up my life in Arizona and moved to Michigan. I was there for a year. She passed, and then I came home. I tried to get back into the corporate world, and I had some hesitation about it because even at 50, age discrimination is alive and well. Doesn't matter what they say, doesn't matter how many documents, laws they pass to make it illegal, it is alive and well. So, not that I couldn't find a job because I managed to find some great jobs after that, but at that point I felt like I had an opening to move into something different. I had a corporate job where I was working 10 to 12 hours a day and then commuting back and forth to work 3 hours a day and then coming home to a pretty much deadbeat relationship. My boyfriend at the time was a workaholic and spent most of his time at the hotel where he worked, so we only saw each other on weekends. My priorities changed after I watched my mother die. Things that were important before weren't important now, and I was the only one that knew that change inside. But on the outside, I didn't have that structured corporate schedule to depend on. At that point, I had no schedule, no purpose. I felt like I had no value. And when I got the RV, I had value. So the first lesson the RV gave me in retirement life was having a purpose, finding the reason why you exist, having something that brings you joy and excitement and brings something to the hours of your life besides just waiting to die. So that was really, that was talking about abrupt life changes. Not only do we have these structured schedules that we lose when we retire, we also have some abrupt life changes, or we could be dealing with some abrupt life changes. I had my regular schedule of corporate world, but then I had the abrupt life change of taking care of my mother, and then the next abrupt life change of getting the RV. And then, which, by the way, I wrote a book about, Coach Life, and it has stories that I will sometimes expand on in my video because that experience was so valuable to me in so many ways after it ended. I'll read an excerpt, and I'm talking about when my mother passed. That year, I learned the value of time and the silliness of stuff. Genevieve had lived a full and comfortable life. She had poured hours of time into her hobbies and volunteer activities and visits with friends. She lived in a professionally decorated home set on a professionally landscaped lot. She traveled regularly and had a fully funded retirement. Her life was charmed not by excess inherited wealth, but rather by her innate and keenly practical financial wizardry. She struggled with times of scarcity, but in the end, she surrounded herself with only the things and people that brought her joy. The only thing she took with her was her regrets. She had many of them. I'll never forget the days when Genevieve tearfully confessed her regrets to me. She hadn't trusted her own abilities enough. She hadn't set large enough goals for herself. She hadn't forgiven enough. And she hadn't been transparent enough in the relationships she cared about the most. Her regrets and confessions haunted me. Their acidic pain leached into my consciousness, forcing me to consider what regrets I might have about my own life. I realized that there was only one way to avoid such bitter pain. I had to acknowledge my possible regrets and immediately take action. I had to start making decisions accordingly. When I purchased the RV, I knew my life would not be the same. And when I realized that I had to find a way to support myself and figure out where I was going to travel, what I was going to do, who I was going to see, what my priorities were, that was going to change my life and make abrupt changes a regular thing. As we get older, abrupt changes, even small ones, affect us more profoundly. So building a tolerance to these changes that happen in our life every day helps us deal with the larger ones when they come along. That's what the RV did for me for this retirement round. Every season for 4 years, I changed where I lived, I changed my neighbors, I changed my vocation, and I changed my climate every season for 4 years. That gets you in the routine of learning how to deal with change. That's so critical to our mental health as we age. So whatever abrupt change you're going through, maybe it's a divorce after 20 or 30 or 40 years of marriage. Maybe it's becoming a widow or a widower. Maybe it's having a new wife or a husband, or just losing your job, leaving a job that you love, or leaving a job that you hate. Whatever the change is, embrace it. It's important that we learn how to adapt to these ever-changing roles in our life as we get older. Another thing that the RV taught me was how to deal with my loss of identity. Here I was, a corporate gal who was dressed in suits and working with Fortune 500 clients and wining and dining them. I had an identity in that. When I got the RV, my RV was not one of those fancy $1 million jobs. Purchased a 10-year-old secondhand 32-foot RV and pulled my car behind it, which means that I was heavier and longer than a semi-truck. Now, just put yourself in the driver's seat of a semi-truck for a minute. Would you feel comfortable there? It took a little while to get used to it. Everywhere I pulled in, I felt like a fake, a phony. It took me probably the first year to get used to my new identity. So whatever you may be interested in, go after it. Even if you're a phony for a year or 2 or 10 years, it's important to find your new identity as a retired person. Sitting in that driver's seat didn't make it happen. I had to make it happen. I had to work at it. And that's probably the biggest point that I want to talk about today is it's so important that we create our identity. We have so much to offer with our knowledge, our length of time on this planet, what we know about people, how we've dealt with problems in our life. We're just such a wealth of knowledge. So carve out an identity for yourself. So you're not just sitting on the couch absorbing whatever comes by, that you're using your life and living your life until the day you die. As I mentioned, when I got in the RV, I didn't have a plan. I had a savings account, but I didn't have a fully funded retirement. And being on the road, I didn't really see a lot of opportunities to fund that retirement much more. However, with a little bit of research and a little bit of try, I opened a world of all kinds of work opportunities for myself. Things that if I would have known were opportunities when I was sitting at my corporate desk, I probably would have pursued. But it was scary thinking, okay, I'm going off into the wild blue yonder. I don't really have a firm plan, but I'm going to trust that I can figure this out. As I'm starting retirement now and getting on Medicare and looking at Social Security and looking at my 401k and figuring that all out, it's scary thinking about going into having a fixed income. What I learned in the RV is it doesn't have to be fixed, that it can fluctuate up and down, that we can find things to do to augment that fixed income that won't feel like work at all, that will contribute to our community. Every season, I got more comfortable with trusting that things would be okay, with trusting that money would come my way, with trusting that when an emergency came up, I'd have funds and people around me to handle it. And you know what happened? The more I believed, the more it happened. It really is true. The more you believe it, the more it'll happen for you. And that's not just some willy-nilly, airy-fairy, pie-in-the-sky thinking. Your thoughts really do contribute to the quality and the effects that goodness has on your life. So in closing, we have talked about 4 different ways that the RV helped me prepare for retirement. And I hope by going over these 4 different ways that you'll think of ways that you can incorporate these lessons into managing your own retirement. We talked about the change from corporate life or a job to having a free day in front of you. We talked about the abrupt changes that you might experience. The loss of a loved one, gaining a loved one, losing a job, gaining a job, changing where you live or how you live. We talked about the concerns of having a fixed income and living on a fixed income. We'll talk about that more in future videos. I'll give you some hints where you can find some ways to augment that fixed income. And finally, we talked about having a purpose, really that it's up to you to decide what you want and to go after it. It really is available for you no matter what it is. Leave some comments below about what you would like to do in your retirement that you're hesitating from starting. I know we can help each other and support each other in getting out there and doing what we want to do with our life instead of just sitting around waiting to die. Let's stop that. I hope you found some value in this video. If you have, please like and subscribe. Thank you for being here till the end, and I hope to see you soon again.